Now the Republicans want $7 billion more in spending cuts, putting at risk the chance of any agreement with the Democrats before a government shutdown on Friday. Steve Bell knows what it's like to be in the middle of a budget fight like this. He was staff director for the Senate Budget Committee and worked for Democratic Senator Pete Domenici for 25 years. Steve is now the senior director of the Economic Policy Project at the Bipartisan Policy Center, which, as its name suggests, was founded by Republicans and Democrats. Steve, what is John Boehner doing here, the House Speaker, by demanding yesterday $7 billion more in budget cuts? Is he effectively sending a message that, no, there won't be a deal here, that the Republican Party actually wants to shut down the government to make a point?
No, I don't think so. I think Speaker Boehner is dealing with reality of his own caucus. And I think it's a little reported story that the problem here is not just the Tea Party that wants big numbers. It's also a group of what's called the Republican Study Committee in the House that wants a variety of riders on such things as the Environmental Protection Agency and stuff like that. So Boehner's trying to cover over a split in his own caucus. Remember, last time this passed, the sixth iteration of this continuing resolution, it was Democrats in the House that provided the votes to get the bill passed. It wasn't Republicans. The question is whether on this Friday the moderate and conservative Democrats will do that again, and I don't know the answer. But Boehner right now is just trying to stay ahead of the curve, and he's just 1 inch ahead of it, I think.
Steve, if there is this divide in the Republican Party, is it an irreconcilable one, which is to say no matter what Speaker Boehner does, he won't be able to get everybody on side enough to be able to reach a deal by Friday?
I think the odds now, for the first time in a long time, are that we'll have a shutdown. I don't know whether it'll just be over the weekend, which will be barely noticed, or whether it'll be a week long, which will be noticed about next Thursday or Friday. The fact of the matter is that Boehner doesn't want to shut down. The president now, in an extraordinary political feat, sort of has the high ground, and people are saying, well, if Boehner just would make a deal with Democrats and the president over a tiny amount of money, we could keep the government open and get on to the important stuff, which, let's be honest, is the fiscal year 12 budget that Paul Ryan introduced yesterday, and the debt limit, which will expire sometime, we think, between May and June.
Steve, we alluded to it. You were staff director of the Senate Budget Committee in the 1980s. If you were in the mix now, what is the number one thing that should be done to find a resolution? What would you do?
I would recommend two things. One, that somebody sit the younger members of the House GOP caucus down and say, listen, you're wasting a lot of political capital over a triviality. So let's not waste any more political capital. Let's put the FY12 budget, the continuing resolution, and the debt bill, those three big challenges, together into one package. And let's talk about how we can have a long-term solution. That'd be the first thing I'd tell them. And the second thing I tell them is there is a way to do it. It was done in 1985 when the debt bill didn't look like it could pass the Senate, and it ended up with a significant reform to the budget process and some real cuts in spending. And I try to talk them into being focused on the big question. $12 trillion of new indebtedness over the next 10 years, not $7 billion over the next 6 months.
Steve, that raises an important question. You said earlier that maybe, almost bizarrely, the president has the high ground on this immediate issue, whether the government stays open come the weekend. But has Paul Ryan succeeded in controlling the debate over the budget going forward for 2012 and ultimately, possibly, for the next decade?
You know, I think the president is in a very good position, and I'm so surprised that I find myself saying that. But because of the divisions in the Republican Party, it gets very, very hard now for Boehner to get a only Republican vote big enough to get that continuing resolution done. What is he going to do when he faces the desire and the necessity, as Tim Geithner has said, to pass the debt ceiling increase? Then the president really will be on the high ground. So I think right now Republicans whose approval rating have gone from about 50 to around 30 are bit by bit spending a lot of political capital on a very tiny fight. And they have given President Obama the initiative, and I'm very surprised. I would not have predicted that.
Steve, we thank you so much for your time, for your insight. Great to have somebody on with us with your perspectives.